So, welcome everyone. Welcome to this Walk, Listen, Create Cafe. Everybody out and about, creative ways to make that happen. And as many of you know, we're Walk, Listen, Create. We support artists, performers, and writers who make work on foot to be consumed on foot or just about walking. So, I'm really pleased that we've managed to get together this trio to present to you and have a discussion and hopefully provoke discussion and thought amongst you all. The kind of format is going to be that I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, which they're going to do in a very brief moment or two. Um, and then we're going to go in order. Now, the way this kind of thing was structured was I thought about, oh, this is clever. I've got someone here, Amble Skuse, and she's worked in the sort of urban core. Yeah. And then the great news is Rowena works in the sort of peri-urban suburbia. And that's pretty interesting. See the differences and maybe contrast and conflict or whatever. And guess what? Tom takes people out into the wilds of the national park. In fact, two national parks because he sits between them. So I thought that would be quite clever. We'd move from the center of the urban core out into the wild countryside. So that's the idea. They each are going to, as I say, quickly introduce themselves, then Amble, and then Rowena, and then Tom are going to do a short presentation. I asked them to keep it to about, I think it was 5, 6, 7 minutes max. So that should happen. Then I'm gonna try and get them to talk a little bit amongst themselves, but hopefully that'll get you guys thinking about questions that you want to ask, and you're going to put them in the chat, and then we're going to, invite you to ask the question yourself and make a comment or whatever. So, first off, a brief introduction of each of them. Amble, you're first.
Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for inviting me. My name's Amble Skuse. I'm a disabled composer and artist. I do a really broad range of work from sound walks to operas to installations, videos. But the sort of underlying theme of everything is kind of the disabled body and how it interfaces with the world. So I'm going to talk today about some of my wheelchair walks. I think that's probably all you need to know. Ask if you have questions, ask if you want to know more about me.
Hi, I'm Rowena Macaulay. I'm not an artist or a performer or a writer. I'm a disabled person, full-time wheelchair user, and I'm also a founder of a community organisation called Walk Colchester, which I set up about 16 years ago, 2010, which is concerned with basically supporting inclusive approaches to walking and the design of the walking environment around the urban fringe, but also concerned with the right to roam, countryside access, so on and so forth.
And hello, everyone. My name's Tom Marsh. My official title is Countryside Activities Officer at a charity called Open Country, which is based up in the north of England. And our basic remit is to help people with disabilities to access and enjoy the countryside. So we want the countryside to be accessible to absolutely everyone. So the reason that I'm here this evening is that I record things called audio walks, which are sort of descriptive passages of walks that help people to connect with the countryside that might not necessarily be able to in other ways. So that's what I'm here to present this evening.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks for the introductions. And so, Amble, you're going to be first to present.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm just going to share my screen. And I'm going to start. I've done a PowerPoint presentation, which is a little bit nerdy, but I hope you'll all forgive me. Cool. I've got the Zoom bar, it's sort of in the way on my screen. But anyway, so I was commissioned by ZKM, which is the Centre for Kunst and Media in Germany. And I was commissioned to do a sound walk around Karlsruhe, which is the city it's based in. And I'm interested in what happens when a disabled person goes into a city they don't know with no planning. So for a lot of disabled people, we have to do a lot of planning. So you have to work out what route you're going to take, whether there's accessible buses, how long you're going to be out for, how to get there, how to get back, blah, blah, blah. So I decided, well, what if I just threw myself into the city and then kind of recorded what happened as a result of that? So these images, I made videos and then I used body sensors to blend the videos. So here you can see there's a bit of floor from the gallery in Karlsruhe, and there's like some buildings with fire escapes, and there's like a van going past. So yeah, the goal was to explore the city's sounds through the lens of a wheelchair user, and to try and share a deep and complex experience for disabled people with non-wheelchair users. So the idea of the walk is that non-wheelchair users can put it on, do the same route as me, but they get the layer of what I'm experiencing. So they get a sense of, well, what was it like for a wheelchair user to be in this space? So you get kind of an invisible me giving them an insight into what I'm doing and how it feels for me. Won't go. Oh, there we go. So some of this was grounded in ideas from disability studies around public performance. And Petra Kopa, she talks about how disabled people are constantly performing in public spaces. We're always like something that people look at, they feel they can question us. They're always, when I get on a bus, everyone looks like, oh, look, wheelchair. So you're constantly having to kind of mediate your own existence in the public space. So this was part of what I wanted to do. And by putting myself in an environment where I didn't know what was going to happen, and likely I would get stuck or I'd fall or there'd be a tram line I couldn't get across, I become a performance while I'm making the sound walk in itself. And the audience are kind of just people who happen to be around and witness me getting into a pickle and whispering into my microphone and all of those sorts of things. So, as I said before, the idea was to kind of move intuitively. Like if you're an abled walker and you go to a new city, you just wander about and see what happens, which is not like really a luxury that I can have a lot of the time. So I had no pre-checked routes, no digital maps, no assistance. And I had body sensors which were recording my stress levels and my movement. I had sound recordings both on my body and on the wheelchair. And I'm kind of interested in the fact that my wheelchair makes a noise as it goes through the city. So, when I'm going across pavements, it will be like clack, clack, clack. And then if there's tiles, it will be like clack, 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 clack. And if I go over a tram line, it's like thunk. And it becomes almost like the city is a record and I'm playing it with my wheelchair. So I really love that idea of like I'm creating a musical, rhythmical experience of the city just by using my wheelchair as a stylus on the record of the city. So I captured audio, all the rattles over the cobbles, the tram lines, traffic, all the vibration levels, movement disruptions, and like my stress levels from EEG monitors that I had. And I also had a mic, so I was like whispering thoughts into my microphone as I got to each space. And it was sort of trying to give an intimate insight into the disabled experience, because there's a lot of kind of questioning of disabled bodies. It's like, oh, what is it like to have that? And what did you do? And why are you in a chair? And are you going to get better? And, have you got a boyfriend? Can you have sex? Like people think they can just ask you all these questions all the time. So kind of by doing these whispered, like really close mic'd vocals, I sort of wanted it to feel almost too intimate for the listener, because it's like, I wanted to say to people, okay, you've got questions, here you are, take it, have everything I'm thinking right now, regardless of how vulnerable it makes me. So there's some stuff on there that is quite sort of vulnerable and quite intimate, but I sort of felt like that was part of the performance, really. Like if I'm gonna give you everything I'm thinking, then just have it. So there's a little bit of a rebellious spirit in being that open, I guess. And then so when I was in places, I was trying to narrate sort of how ableist things can appear when you're disabled in a space. So like going through a bridal shop and all the thoughts of like who's deemed attractive, and like dating when you're in a wheelchair or disabled, and you go past a job centre and all the stigma about disability benefits and employment and why aren't you working, and then you go past a gym and you have all these thoughts about like the ideal body and how culture expects us to look one way, and if your body is disabled in some way, like you're never going to measure up. So I'm trying to sort of narrate all of these internal ableist thoughts that you have as you walk around a city, things that maybe abled people might not even occur to them, that each of these things is bringing up all of these issues for disabled people. So that, I think that might be the end of the presentation. It is, it's very short. And then I thought what I might do is just play you a few little bits if we've got time. So my friend Emily Fong is a visual artist, and she drew this map which was based on photos that I took from the gallery. So these are all kind of textures that I found as I went around Karlsruhe. And then she's marked on like where to listen to each track, and she's put the names of the streets on there. So the first one I wanted to play you is Fully Integrated Machines, which is kind of about how disabled people are cyborgs, but we're never really seen as these amazing futuristic part human, part machines. We're always seen as these broken things that everybody ought to ignore, whereas actually we're the ones at the forefront of cyborgism. So I wanted to just make a piece about that a little bit, so I'll just play you a bit of that.
Really very fit and healthy older people and their smart ideas, and people get around, but it kind of just feels really weird. Don't make any sense. The advertising, they all kind of older people, but clearly very fit and healthy older people, and they're smiling and it's almost wearing smart clothes, and I don't really identify with it, even though this is a shop that is probably designed for people like me or people older than me, but in a similar kind of physical situation. I wonder why it's made like that, and I wonder if those images are really there for able-bodied people to say it might not be so bad, you know. When you get older, you can still have some kind of quality of life. Because I don't really think those images are made for me. I live with my cyborgy and wheels, and that's fine. Anything but I don't need reassuring in that way. It's very the same as a bicycle helps you move from A to B. My wheelchair helps me move from A to B, and yet what are our reactions when we see these objects? Do we feel these objects that other people need, different people, different other people need? It's strange that we have so much connection. We have so much connection, baggage with these objects, which are just extensions of the human into mechanical and electronic form. And yet in other places we see, you know, bicycles and the latest earbuds and these super cool kind of cyborg objects objective marketed, which is a super cool and yet disabled people have been cyborgs for a long time.
Disabled people have been cyborgs for a long time.
We are fully integrated.
We are fully integrated into our machines.
Our machines.
The machine become part of our experience.
We are fully
integrated into our machines. We are fully integrated into our machines.
So yeah, and I've got other sound walks if you have a look on my website, which is just myname.net, and under music and composing, I've got my sound walks in there. So there's one in Cairo, one in Morocco, Plymouth, very tropical, Karlsruhe and Nantes, and they all have little maps, and all the tracks are on there as well. So if you want to have a look, that's the Nantes map and the tracks, and it's all on there. So if you feel like you want to know a little bit more or have listened to those, or if you're in Nantes, Plymouth, Karlsruhe, or Essaouira or Cairo, feel free to put on your headphones and have a listen. I don't know what my screen's just done, so I'm going to stop sharing. But yeah, that's my thing.
I mean, my quick question to you, Amble, is you've not always been in a wheelchair, so there's a bit of history behind that, isn't there? So you actually were an enthusiastic hiker and walker and...
Yeah, before I got ill, I used to like hike around like Snowdonia. A lot of my family are from North Wales, so we did a lot of hiking in Snowdonia, and it was like that was my way of just like getting getting good at a weekend, or just like getting everything out of my system. So then being a wheelchair user and not having that there, I saw quite a lot of like walking art things being advertised, and I just felt like, hang on a minute, why can't I do that? And so, yeah, there was a bit of, I think there was a quote somebody put about how, you're only ever really alive when you're walking. And I was like, damn you, that's not true. I use a wheelchair and I'm alive. And it was just like trying to counter some of that and think about how it's different when you're a wheelchair user from when you're not a wheelchair user, and the things that I see now that I never saw before, and wanting to sort of make that a bit more visible, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry, I feel like I've rattled on for ages.
that's good. Rowena, your turn to rattle on.
Oh, thank you. And I fear I'm going to let me just, and I've got the same problem that you had. It's in controls being hidden. Here we go. There we go. Yeah, I just start by saying that like Amble, I wasn't always in a chair. In fact, the first half of my life, first 30 years of my life, to give my age away immediately. I was non-disabled, and in fact I grew up on a farm, and so I enjoyed great freedom to roam, which I completely took for granted. And I only really started thinking about walking, ironically, when I no longer could, and I had to return to my hometown, but now living right in the centre of the city, and came to just think about, well, where was I going to walk now, and how I was going to access the countryside, which is what I wanted to be able to do, and the information wasn't out there. So that's why walk culture had very practical origins. And in fact, this is the work that you're looking at now. The work that's kind of consuming most of my time is campaigning to have removed, or at the very least redesigned, the many styles and hitting gates, man-made barriers, basically around public rights of way around my hometown. But these exist in hundreds of thousands all over the country, of course. So that's what's taking up my time. It's very practical. But I would say that at the very least, if not an artist, that I have a creative approach to problem solving. And the problem that I spend an awful lot of my time on is thinking about how to engage people in walking, particularly in countryside access, who currently don't access the countryside, or who feel they can't. Even though I'm a chair user myself, I do still tend to use the language of walking in a generic sense, just to mean the kind of simplest way of getting around, whether that's on your feet, or in a wheelchair, or via a scooter, and so on and so forth. So this question of how to influence behaviour is very intransigent. It's not exclusively relevant to disabled people, but it is particularly important to them, because I've come to learn that the provision of straightforward, good quality information, which you might think is what they're lacking, is not by itself enough. It doesn't reliably translate into action. And in trying to address that issue, I've gone down a few creative cul-de-sacs, it's fair to say. But one approach that has felt more successful has been through the use of images of walking, and particularly through the activity of photo trailing, which I would describe as the telling of a story of a walk through sequenced images. And just to tell you a bit about how I came to that, I got into this initially when I was studying for a degree in inclusive design, and I used large-scale photographs to bring the experience of different pathways. I was doing a research piece on the design of pathways, to bring the experience of different kinds of paths to my research participants, who were all older and disabled, and I couldn't realistically take them to the pathways. And I was really struck by how people who were or had been kind of silent or disengaged in that research process up until the point I got photographs out suddenly became very animated. They interacted with the images, they interacted with each other. And in particular, they were able to form very, very speedy judgments, rightly or wrongly. Of course, they might be wrong, and that's a responsibility that the photographer has, or photograph has, about whether they thought they could access that pathway, and even more importantly, whether they felt that they wanted to or not. Sometimes they were like fearful of the images or what they seemed to present. So I changed direction and went on to do my actual thesis in this area, looking at the role of photography, photo-visual information generally in advancing inclusive access to the countryside. And to cut a very long story short, what came out of that was a much clearer understanding of the particular potency of images, if I can put it that way, that photographs have in addressing this complex area of decision making, because they speak so strongly, not just to our rational need for information, but also to our emotions, to motivations, the desire to go to places, and finally to our confidence, the belief that we can go to places. I had lots of influences along the way, and I'm just very quickly mentioning one. This is somebody called Jackie Kenny. I keep wanting to call it Jackie Kennedy. Jackie Kenny, the agoraphobic traveller who took these beautiful still images, which have been exhibited publicly. But she takes them all via Google Earth. This work dates back to 2016, and really goes to show how her relationship with images have allowed her to explore outside the real physical confines of her house and outside the kind of boundaries of her disability. And I went on in my own work then to start really putting images first and foremost, and not removing text from the process, but reversing the conventional relationship in which text is a bit that gets taken most seriously and images are just used as the pretty things to kind of be illustrative. So this is what you're seeing. This is just some work we've been doing recently, producing photo trails of the coastal path around my county of Essex. And this is a leaflet style one you're looking at, because we were hoping that they would go into tourist information offices, but they are going to be available in slide format as well. Photo trailing led me to think more about the process of creating routes rather than technically building new paths, because paths are very, very expensive. They're very slow to produce. They're politically complex. They take a lot of time to negotiate. And at the end of all of that, you've just got one new path. Whereas a route is essentially free to create. A well planned out route can take a long time to build, but it's essentially free, and anybody can go about that process. And just to give you finally one example of that, this is a sort of 14-mile route and photo trail around my hometown, Colchester, which was initially set up to kind of link green space around the urban fringe. We sort of hoped that it would, in doing that, we would create a bit of a buffer against development, so that we imagined a day in the future when people might say, "Oh, you can't possibly build there because it's right on top of the cultural orbital, don't you know?" That's a thing, I'm not sure that we weren't 100% successful, or a bit late to that particular party, but nonetheless, it has come to become a thing of substance. And one of the ways we sort of helped that happen, because we just started with a free Google map that you can see, and a knowledge of our town, and a map of all the public rights of way. But over time, we sort of built it up. We gave it its own coffee table book, which was very good in engaging with local councillors and getting money from them. And then using that money, we went on to develop what we like to think is quite a beautiful sort of map, again, very visual. And then we turned that into an interactive map available, obviously, via mobile phones. And one way or another, over time, this has really entered the public consciousness and sort of passed its tipping point, become part of the cultural life of the town, if you like. And nowadays, people post recordings every once in a while. Something will pop up on YouTube, and it's somebody else has recorded themselves walking around the orbital. People do arranged marathons around it. There's now a cycling version of it. So all of that's been really gratifying. And finally, most excitingly for me, there's a local punk band called Pet Needs in Colchester. They're actually going places now. And they wrote a song in which cultural orbital gets mentioned, unbelievably. And because they're going places, the cultural orbital has now literally been mentioned you know, in cities across Europe and across the States because they've been touring, you know. So this makes me incredibly excited, and yeah, I'll leave that there and hand over to Tom and to come back to some of these issues in discussion after. Stop share.
Thank you, Rowena. Shall I take the reins from there then? Excellent. Right. So I thought I'd just start off by giving you a brief history of open country, which is basically where the whole idea for these audio walks came from. So as I say, Open Country is a charity based here in the north of England that helps people to access and enjoy the countryside. So across 6 days of the week, we have activities for people with all different types of disabilities to partake in as they wish. So during the week, for example, we have walking groups and conservation groups that are involved in helping nature flourish across the region. And also we have a trailblazers group that goes out to lay paths and maybe take out stiles and help access to the rest of the countryside around the Yorkshire region and beyond. And then at weekends we have outings for people who are maybe a little bit less able and less able to get involved with those conservation activities. We also have an adventure group as well. So we have people going out to do things as adventurous as skydiving and water skiing and all those sort of adventure sports that you would think surely disabled people can't do that, but Open Country try and make that happen. So we've been in operation now for 35 years. It started off as just a little council-led project, and it's blossomed today into all of these groups and activities going out, as I say, 6 days a week. But then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and at that point, all of our activities stopped as abruptly as everything else did. So during that period, we were sort of discussing as a staff team, how on earth can we connect with these people that rely on us, their connection to the countryside? How can we help them to still maintain that involvement? And one of my colleagues suggested, well, maybe if we can't help them to access the countryside, maybe we can bring the countryside to them into their own lockdown worlds. And that was where the idea of these audio walks were born. And a few of my colleagues had a go at recording them, but eventually they decided that it was my dulcet tones that seemed to fit the bill more than anybody else. So I set about just going out and recording my lockdown walk to start off with. And people seemed to really engage with it. Not just people that were locked down necessarily, who were all locked down, but the more it sort of developed, the more people that weren't necessarily visually impaired, who had a big connection at the beginning with these audio walks, but everybody seemed to jump on this bandwagon. So they said, Tom, can you record more? Can you record more? Can you record more? And so we've now got a bank of 66 audio walks that I've recorded in total. That have ranged across the Yorkshire region, but also as far as Iceland as well, when I was leading a photography workshop up there a few years ago. I managed to record one whilst I was there as well. And I suppose the main thing with the audio was that the life that they've taken on since that lockdown period is not only necessarily connecting people with disabilities to the countryside that wouldn't necessarily otherwise be able to access it, but also helping other people that might not be able to access it right now still form that connection. So we've had messages from people across the other side of the world in Australia saying, oh, I was brought up in that area, and listening to your audio walks just brings me back there and connects me to it. We've had messages from people that no longer are able to access the places that they used to be able to access. They've either grown old and not be able to get out into the countryside like they used to, and they say that the audio walks just make them feel like they're back out there again and experiencing what they used to experience. And it's come to a point as well where it sort of superseded me as a recorder as well, which is quite nice. It just takes that onus off me being the voice of the audio walks, and people just tend to lapse into what I'm saying and the experiences that I'm sharing. And it's made me as well a lot more observant of my surroundings. When I first went out to do one of these, yes, I could pick up on a few various different things, but now when I go out, I just realize how much I originally took for granted. The things that, not just that we can see, but the things that we can smell, the things that we can hear, taking on board all of our senses, not just the visual ones, to really engage and help other people engage with the countryside that I suppose, like I say, I took for granted before. So what I shall do is I've just taken a short snippet of one of these audio walks just to give you an example of what that sounds like. Bear with me, because I can't find how to minimize my screen now. I might have to stop sharing and then come back into it. Bear with me. So the story behind this little snippet of audio walk is we were commissioned after lockdown by a few organisations local to us, so Bolton Abbey Estate in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and also Nidderdale National Landscape, to help people that may be visiting there or virtually visiting their sites to engage in these audio walks. And one of the things that I love doing when I record them is to go out on days when even people that are perfectly ambulant and would easily be able to access the countryside would maybe even think twice about it. So the little snippet that I'm going to play you now was on an absolutely dreadful day in the wilds of the North York moors. It was blowing a hoolie, the rain was pouring down. But I think that all of that seems to add to the atmosphere and just add to the experience of the audio walk. So here we go. So here we go. It seems like we're actually braving this. It's hard to believe that I'm actually recording this audio walk on a midsummer's day. My clothing would suggest something maybe more autumnal or even wintry. I've got my Wellington boots on, my over trousers and a thick waterproof winter coat. I've also got my umbrella up, which I'm doing my best to point into the prevailing wind, which is lashing the rain across the moorland towards my face. It's also hopefully going to do a decent job of keeping my recording equipment dry. Even the hardy moorland sheep in the field over to our right are finding it difficult as they hunker down behind a dry stone wall. So I suppose the idea of the audio walks isn't really to give people a guided tour. It's just to help them to feel when they're listening to what I'm saying and the ambient sounds around that they're in the countryside. And as I said right at the beginning, Open Country's remit is to make sure that the countryside is as accessible to all as it possibly can be. And hopefully the audio walks is a step in that direction. So thank you very much for listening.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, look, thanks for all three of you. That's really good and really kind of interesting stuff. And I know what you're talking about is actually only a tiny slice of what you all get up to. You know, I know there's lots more that you do and lots more things that you've made and all the rest of it. You seem to have silenced our audience. There aren't practically nothing in the chat except good old Tamsin. Well done, Tamsin, for at least trying to get people to contribute. So if you've got a question or your thought that comes up, then please put it together. I had a couple of questions which thankfully Rowena has reminded me what they were, which was going to ask these three to sort of talk about what pitfalls they encountered and how they creatively overcame them in what they were doing and what they do elsewhere beyond what they've just talked about. So that's the kind of first question that I was going to ask. And the second one was about what are they most proud of. But shall we start with the pitfalls and then who wants to answer that? Tom or Amble or Rowena? Which of you are going to have a go on that?
I can go first if you would like. I suppose for me, in terms of the pitfalls, it purely comes down to the limitations of my recording equipment, really. Like you've just heard, I go out and record on in any different conditions. It doesn't bother me. But with us being a charity, we don't necessarily have all of this fancy recording equipment available to us. So I just tend to go out with my phone and cup it in my hands to stop any distortion from the wind coming around it. So on a day like you've just heard, it was almost as difficult to record and get a reasonably audible piece than it was to actually venture out in the first place. So I think that, again, sometimes our equipment can have disabilities as well as ourselves, can't it? So it's just a case of running with it and hopefully it adds some kind of I don't know, some kind of quality to the eventual product.
Rowena, you're doing yourself mute.
Sorry, am I?
You'll go.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were saying I was on mute. Yeah, pitfalls. Well, I mean, you're quite familiar with one of mine, Andrew, although I've come full circle and returned to it. And that is that when I first set up Walk Colchester, it was as a digital mapping kind of enterprise project. We were going to be mapping Colchester's routes, walking routes, via a digital map facility. Digital maps I was really, really interested in at the time. I also thought that they would be particularly powerful for providing inclusive information in a really equitable way, in that we can all come to the same facility, the same piece of software, and take different kinds of information from it according to our needs and interests. So I really liked that about it, that we might create a map that was layered up with information that non-disabled people could come to, but also disabled people across a whole range of disabilities and levels of ability, and they could personalize that map. So that was what I really liked about digital maps, but I sort of I left out some critical details or overlooked them. The first was I didn't actually have any digital mapping skills myself at all. And digital maps, so I was just interested in them and I could see their potential, I thought. But of course, they're very complex to build and incredibly expensive to build. And I didn't have the time or the money, really, or even the connection. So that was the first thing, was a non-starter. But also, I hadn't really thought about my audience, really, not very carefully. I just thought about the power of them to provide digital maps, to provide information. But of course, digital maps aren't terribly equitable when it comes to actually thinking about whether people like maps or not. Maps are sort of a bit the sort of Marmite of the walking world. People either love maps or don't, and digital maps even more so. And some people don't even have access to those facilities at all, and they're scary to them. So it was a bit crazy putting all of the information basing it all on a digital map, when quite possibly I was going to be leaving out 3/4 of the people that I was trying to kind of speak to. So that was the first dead end. But I actually have gone on to work for a digital mapping company. That's what my paid day job is. Walk culture is like, community thing, extracurricular, if you like. So I have come full circle, and it is our company that built the orbital map that you saw a shot of. So, but now I'm much, much more conscious of what the audience is and for what purpose, and reaching them via different mediums as well, not putting all eggs in that particular basket. So I guess that would be the main example for me.
I think the biggest pitfall that I had was that I underestimated how much it would take out of me. I'd initially thought I would look at all these interesting places in Karlsruhe, and I would go from the gallery to the city centre to the zoo. And then, like, the first day I got from the gallery to the city centre, I realised I'd completely broken myself. I was in tears. I had to get a cab back to the gallery, and I just thought, like, how am I going to do this? I had to spend 2 days in bed recovering from just doing, like, what is a 20-minute walk for everybody else. Just getting from the gallery back to the city centre was like, oh shit, this is not gonna work. So then I had to make my route a lot smaller. So it just goes around a little residential-ish neighborhood, which is where the gallery is. And even then, having to think about the recorders on the wheelchair, what stories I was going to tell, what issues were coming up, how I was going to record myself, recording the traffic, having the body sensors, getting that data back to the gallery, getting it all into the laptop. It was like I could get to the gallery and do like one loop of the route that I'd decided, but I couldn't do anything else. So, like, I then have to go to bed for 2 days and then get up again and go, okay, what information don't I have? And I have to go out and do it again. So I think that was the biggest learning point for me, was that actually what sounds like quite a simple task, which is just find a route and talk about what it brings up for you, was just enormous in terms of like cognitive and physical impact. And then just little things like, I was in Nantes and I was going along this path, which is by the river, which is really nice, but there was a tree root and my wheel got stuck on it and my chair started to fall, and there's quite a steep bank. And at one point, I actually thought I was going to fall in the river. It was really quite scary. I started sliding down this bank and there was not a lot I could do about it. So there's that aspect of it as well, when you're saying, oh, I'm going to do an unplanned jaunt into the city. And it's like, actually, there's a reason that disabled people don't do that. And it's because A, it's exhausting, and B, you might fall in the river. So I think Andrew asked me when we were preparing for this, he was like, oh, so do you make routes for other disabled people to take? And I was like, no, please don't. If you're a wheelchair user, please don't do my walks, because I deliberately put myself in difficult positions, but then I have to be responsible for that, and I have to deal with the consequences of that in order to tell the story. So yeah, it's quite a lot to physically do, bearing in mind that most of the work I do from my bed, and the most physical aspect of it is lifting my laptop off the drawers and putting it on my lap. Making a sound walk is like huge. So yeah, that was like the biggest kind of challenge for me, is like, oh, how do I actually do this? It's a great idea, but this is going to properly batter me. And Rowena's nodding and smiling. I'm sure you've been there as well.
Yeah, I definitely have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just reminding me of my dream job came up, it was like access to the countryside officer or something. I got halfway through sort of filling out the application form before I realized it was just a complete non-starter, because I actually couldn't get to the countryside to do the job,
Yeah.
the dream job that had been created for me. It was just
Yeah.
reminding me of that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Because I think sometimes you can see what needs to be done, and then you sort of also have to you get into that bargaining phase where you're like, oh, please let me be able to do this, because I know that it needs to be done. But yeah, it's like managing what you want to put out into the world with what you can realistically put out into the world. It's a tough kind of balance to keep going.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Amble, I mean, your CV is extraordinary. You've got your sound walking is only a tiny fragment of what you do. And
Yeah.
so what I'm kind of interested in is how much harder is it to do what the other things you do, like composition or opera, and all sorts of other things that you've been doing. You wanted to make the sound walks, you wanted to do that, but there are lots of other things that you're doing that are pressing on your time. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of it depends. Every project's different. I would say the majority of what I do, I can do in my pajamas without leaving my bed. Things like the sound walks, not only do you have to do the sound walk, but like you have to get out of bed, you have to like ideally have a wash, you have to put clothes on, you have to get your chair to the start of the sound walk, you have to talk to the people in the gallery. Just doing that is more than I would normally do in a day, let alone doing the actual work. So the soundworks is probably the most challenging thing that I do physically. The opera, the first one was challenging in a different way because we did it during COVID. So we rehearsed and recorded the entire opera over Zoom, which then meant we had to buy recording equipment, send it to the performers, teach them how to set it up, teach them how to record themselves, do a rehearsal, do a recording, get them to send me the track, me listen back to it to make sure that it was okay and we didn't need any rewrites. So that was like mentally exhausting because not only are you like the composer trying to get a good recording of your concert, of your opera, but you're also like tech support at the same time, and you're trying to deal with compositional performance questions of like, well, how do you want this phrase, how do you want that phrase, and like where's the dramatic hit point and all of that stuff. But then at the same time you've got somebody like, oh, I can't get a level on my mic, and you have to keep flipping backwards and forwards in your head and then trying to do all of that on Zoom, which is so frustrating because you're having to try and think, well, how do I explain this to somebody rather than just go and fix it myself. So like everything I do sort of has its own challenges. um I love doing the sound walks, but they are, just incredibly intense. Um, and there's this, I mean, am I rambling on? There's this whole thing, I think, with the first one, because I'd said to ZKM, well, I'll be in ZKM for 2 weeks and I can make the sound walk. There's this aspect, I think, that is difficult for disabled people in the performing arts of kind of the show must go on. Like we've got a deadline and it's got to be ready for the performance, it's got to be ready for the launch. So if anything happens that puts your body back, you can't do anything about time continuing, even if you're not able to continue. So, like from a conceptual artist point of view, it would have been really interesting to just go, can't do it, and to write a paper about the fact that I didn't make a sound walk. And that's an interesting thing that people need to learn, that if I say I'm going to do something, I might not, and that's fine because disability theory and crip time and flexibility of conditions and all of that stuff. But I felt that kind of ableist pressure to be like, well, if you've said you're going to do it, you have to deliver. So then you have that kind of tension inside of yourself where you're beating yourself up for something you can't control, which is your illness. So that kind of the show must go on thing is hard, I think, for disabled artists because we don't know if we can make that deadline, and there's nothing we can do about it if our body says it's not going to do it. Yeah, I've
Okay,
waffled
well,
on quite a lot there, but
okay. Well, the good news is that Dee, Tamsin, and Greg have popped things in. So Dee, you've got a couple of comments that you made. Would you like to voice them, or just have them answered, or how do you feel?
Hi everyone. Thanks so much for a lovely evening. They weren't really questions other than the last one. They were just more reflections and comments. It's been really wonderful to hear about your different walks and works. But my only last question was to Amble about the record. I love the metaphor of the record needle on the record of the place. And I just wondered whether there was like any of the places that really lent themselves as a favourite record to be played by your engagement with it. Is there like you talked about with the cobbles and the tram tracks and which I guess are also quite challenging places to navigate in a wheelchair. Oh, so they create a lovely soundscape, but they made it, more challenging really to negotiate. But is that like I'm thinking of the fabric of the city really, that some cities seem to have maybe more of a sense of that record being played by the needle of your wheelchair and body moving through it.
Yeah, I mean, cobbles are my nemesis. Whenever I get near cobbles, I just go over them going, cobbles. But there's this one bit outside the University of Plymouth where there's quite a fast, steep hill past the museum. And if you go past that on full speed, it's going clack, 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 clack. So that's like really good fun, especially if it's quite windy. And then when you get to the bottom of that, there's this weird sort of triangle of open space. It's between a shopping centre and the university and a roundabout, and it's just this big open space. And for some reason, they've put all these weird kind of textured lumps and like grills and like it's I don't know why they did it. It's some weird bit of town planning, but it is like a textural sound playground for me. So I just spent ages like recording myself going over all these kind of grills and lumps and gravels and stuff. It was like, God, this is like it's been put here just for me to play with. And people that don't use wheelchairs will not be getting any fun out of this at all. So yeah, I think it's called something like something playground. It's on the Plymouth track, the Plymouth Sound Walk. But yeah, that was really fun. Just like, why have these been put here almost magically just for me to make clicky noises with? Yeah, that was good.
Thank you, brilliant.
Thanks.
Tamsin has asked the question, which I think many of us who are able-bodied would be asking too. So, Tamsin, do you want to voice what you said, what you read?
Yes, I mean, I know these questions can be really annoying to people who are having to daily manage what you're having to manage. If you want to do what you explained, something that the rest of us probably don't think twice about doing. But yes, any advice for myself or for other able-bodied at the moment, I know that might not necessarily last, walking artist, to ensure that my sound walks or my community walks are as accessible to as many people as possible.
So I could say something in response to that, but I don't know whether it's a really useful answer to your question. It's just that if I start by saying in Colchester, when I first came back here, literally 30 years ago, there were the same 2 half-mile so-called easy access trails that the council had put on for disabled people as there are now. They literally have not increased that body of provision. And partly that's just terrible, terrible laziness, shame on my council, absolutely. But it's also because of this, what I call a kind of lowest common denominator approach to provision for disability, and I, as a disabled person, other people might feel differently, disabled people included, but I really reject that notion. There's such a huge range of impairment type and ability that falls within the catch-all of disability. And I really want to, and then there's so many opportunities for countryside access. So if you put all of those variables together, it's just, almost an indefinite amount of opportunities that we're not reporting on. So my mission is to really try and extend disabled people's own expectations of themselves, like their conceptual horizons as well as real absolute horizons. But then how do you do that in a way that isn't just putting information out there, but some disabled people will come to you thinking, oh, great, this is for me. And then they'll find, no, it's not for them. And it's not for them. It's not for them because their disability is not going to allow them to do that particular trail, So that's the problem. We can just do everything lowest common denominator, but it's not terribly interesting. I don't know. I never see any disabled people doing those half-mile loops because they do connect with the Colchester orbital. So I advertise them, but you don't see many people doing them. I did them once 30 years ago. I don't need that experience again. So there's a tension. How do we open up the countryside and it needs opening up, and it can be to many, many people, but that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be doing that just because there are some disabled people over here, like let's just say visually impaired walkers, who aren't going to be able to make use of pretty much anything I've said tonight. But then we will try and do other things that directly do work with visually impaired walkers and are meaningful to them. So I think it's just, you have to be, the useful thing I would say to you maybe is to engage with disabled people, firstly, like in the planning, take your public with you, rather than try to do anything in a kind of top-down sort of way. And be very clear in your marketing of your walk, about what kind of walk it's going to be. I always try to say, describe the walk, not the walker. Let people come to that information and make up their own minds. That's why I think photographs are so rich, because we can all come to photographs and take different information from them. So it's a responsibility, but people knowing who you are, that you're not an unknown quantity out there who's putting this walk on, but knowing who you are, you person with the face, and this is the thinking that you've done around the walk, and this is what the walk is going to offer, and inviting them for feedback or comments in advance or questions in advance, making yourself available. All of those things are very important.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm just wondering, Rowena, you get walk books and they have like the blue, the green, and the red walks, and it's like, well, if you're a beginner, then just do the blue walks, and if you're an advanced, then you just do the red walks, and it has like the elevation that you're going to walk, and it has the distance that you're going to walk, and any difficult bits, like if you have to scramble and stuff. And I wonder if there's a way of coding walks for disability as well. Like this walk is all going to be on pavement. This walk goes onto the grass. This walk has a style, so that people can be like, okay, I can't do any of the walks with the style because I've got my chair. But this, I wonder if like as time progresses, we'll find a way of coding like a walk book, so that people can decide for themselves, like, oh, that one's going to suit me and that one isn't, rather than like what you're saying, which is like, oh, if it isn't accessible for every single disabled person who's ever lived, then it's not an accessible walk. That if we find a way of describing walks in a way that enables people to make their own decisions about whether they think they can do it. And then just on a kind of accessibility side for sound walks, is obviously the biggest impairment that we have to deal with is people with hearing impairments, because it doesn't really mean a lot to them if you do a sound walk. So I would say like always have the text available, have it in like an easy read or like a really legible font on your website, so that if people can't listen to it and walk, some people would find that overwhelming in terms of sensory stuff as well. They can't listen and walk and deal with what's going on around them. So if you give people text, then at least if they want to put their headphones on, their ear protectors on, so they're not getting sensorily overwhelmed, or if they've got a hearing impairment, they can just read what you want to say at any particular time and then put it back in their pocket and then be in the room again. I mean, obviously BSL is amazing as well if you do BSL videos as you go along the walk, but like that's a financial like massive issue. But wouldn't it be amazing to do a sound walk and make the sound walk video and have a BSL translator like translating everything you're saying? But like lots of different formats, like have it on your website in a really easy format, especially like my stuff where I layer lots of voices. I think it's fine for neurotypical people to get a sense of what it's like to be in a body that's sensorially overwhelmed. But I also know that people who do get sensory overwhelmed can't actually listen to my stuff because it's too much. So in a way, I'm trying to make able people feel like it feels like to be us, as opposed to making things for disabled people, if that makes any sense. But yeah, having text and images like Rowena does is amazing, so people can make decisions for themselves. Like when you say there's a muddy bit, how muddy is muddy? Like show me the mud. Yeah.
Yeah, can I pitch in with and ask Tom, because Tom, a lot of the things you do kind of group walks, but you also have carers and volunteers that kind of assist people. Is that even one-to-one? Are they, are the things that, that could enable people to go further or to be more confident that you've encountered in what you've done in developing the countryside activities and not just the audio trail?
Yeah, I suppose from my perspective, it's just helping people to gain confidence because when I lead a walking group every Thursday, and we have people with learning disabilities, we have people who are visually impaired, and some a bit of both. And when I first started with the group and we got some new members in, they were very, very tentative in terms of how they would approach each walk. And for example, if we were doing a 5 to 6 mile walk, it would take this all day to get around because they were, like we say, poddling around on the mud and dithering with every style that they came across. But the more that they've done it, the more that they've got into it, the more that they've thrown themselves into it, they realize, actually, I can do this, and my ability actually supersedes what I thought my ability was in the first place. And not only is that really refreshing to see, it also goes to show that sometimes if we push ourselves, I know some people can't push themselves as much as others, but if we do allow ourselves to push ourselves to the best of our ability, then it is amazing what we can achieve. And going back to what you were saying, Amble, about the grading of walks, we actually produce a series of packs called Break Free packs, which I think was a movement by, I can't remember which organisation, but back in the sort of late 90s, but we've kind of revived it now. And basically, we produce these sleeves with cards in, and each card represents a trail. It could be like a cycling trail or an easy walking trail. And basically, we've got this grading system where it's like a number and a letter. So for example, A would be tarmac, and 1 would be little to no gradient, and 5 would be really steep gradients, and D is off-road grass and soggy mud. So we try and grade each trail to those letter and number systems, and then on the maps that we produce, we put like each individual gradient that appears around the walk, and also points of interest and whether there's a bench there so people can sit down and have a break if they want to, viewpoints and things like that. So that's been our approach to it anyway.
I know that there has been it's turning into quite a science actually, how you measure and represent information in the outdoor environment, really, in ways that like speak across all of the different variables and to people across different disability type. And it is actually a much harder thing to do than you would imagine, and there's plenty of people grappling with it, and various different competing systems, which is, interesting in its own right. But for example, there's a project called Slowways in the UK that was it didn't start as a disability related project. In fact, completely the opposite. It wasn't really thinking about disability at all to start off with, but it's come full circle to think about that. But it was trying to kind of triangulate different towns and key locations all across the country, across the UK. They basically came up with, each of these edges was about sort of 10 miles long. So, and that's also the trouble we find, like with the Colchester orbital, for example, it's a 14-mile loop. We've divided it into sections, but how do you represent a section that, for example, is barrier free, because that's kind of starting point for obviously chair users, which I have treated as a kind of discrete category, because they all have that in common. If you literally can't get out of a chair, then you have something, of a sort of communality of experience with others in a similar situation. But some of these stretches are really very accessible in lots of ways, but just have one point along it, which is an absolute no-go. Like on the orbital, there's a tunnel that goes underneath the railway line, which runs straight across, you can't avoid it on the orbital, and then up a flight of stairs on the other side. So It's got beautiful countryside at the top and the bottom of the flight of stairs, but it's an absolute no-go. If you're in a chair, you have to, but how do you sort of represent that stretch of the orbital? Yeah, it's a really difficult thing, and we're always grappling with these kind of tensions.
No, because I was going to say that I did some, it didn't start out the way it was meant to start out, but we were looking at gradients through Lewisham. And the reason why we were looking at them was we were actually looking at how we could discourage skateboarders from using certain roads or streets to skateboard down. So it's a kind of weird kind of sort of thing that we were up to, and we were looking at the kind of gradients, and there were these guys who were really sort of like hip and really get out there and skateboard, and do sort of kind of parkour skateboarding, so they're sort of crashing from one building to another or from one funny obstacle to another on their skateboards, and so what we developed, with them was a ski run type of version across Lewisham, so you could identify this would be black or double black, would be terrifying if you actually did it, and they linked them to bus routes, because what they wanted to do was they wanted a quick way to get to the top of the summit before they could skate down. Okay, so that's kind of where it began. But what was really fascinating was the number of wheelchair users who started wanting to use that. And that was a completely whole different ballgame, which, we didn't have the money, and the project wasn't meant to be going in that direction anyway. It was meant to be like youth engagement, and not to go into that kind of thing. But then, we had this terrifying situation where we thought we were going to have wheelchair users zooming down and ending up on the South Circular or the A2 or something like that. It's like, Christ, what have we done? So we had to kind of try and withdraw the maps. But then, of course, they got out there. That kind of thing. So I know very much about the sort of grading thing, and also how the grading thing can be guerrillaed or hijacked for completely the wrong reasons. Okay,
but
so
Andrew, I was just going to say, why would it matter if wheelchair users took that information and ran with it? I mean, no wheelchair user, or very few, are going to wantonly put themselves in danger unless they can do it. Is that a non-disabled person's fears? You haven't misrepresented what you're doing.
Yeah, okay. Rowena,
you see what I mean? There's
Rowena and I have gone head on this sort of kind of stuff before. Yeah, okay. I'll explain offline, he said. Okay, there are other people who did put in a little pointer. Anne-Marie, but Greg, you patiently waited. You made a comment about to explain where you're based and what you were saying about Rowena's visuals and things.
Oh, I
it was long ago, you may have forgotten what you wrote.
Well, what I said to Amble is just banal, but just I wanted to, as I've said before to you in other presentations, I just, it's all new to me, walking culture and what's done by our three presenters is just, it's inspiring and wonderful. And I mean, the idea that I could do anything to bring it here. I'm a caregiver, and my disabled partner's in the next room, and she would love to be exposed to something, to some of the things that are done by the folks presenting today, and it's just not here. But thank you for, I guess, introducing the possibility. I don't know what kind of outreach there is internationally, if folks here know anybody in Southern California that's doing similar things. I'd like to hear it. But anyway,
And
Yeah,
does Jonathan Stalls
but he's in Colorado, not in
Oh,
California.
right, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. There's Walk to Connect, which is run by Jonathan Stalls, Intrinsic Paths. What I can do is I can send out with an email with a few connections and things like that. There's an organization called Walk America, for example, and there are some other organizations. There's a very big conference that runs annually called Walk 21. And every year it turns up somewhere, and it has been in San Francisco, I think, hasn't it, Rowena? Can you go to San Francisco? It certainly went to Portland in Oregon. So yeah, I can sort of put you in touch with those people as well. But I have to say, I don't know. I personally don't know. We've got a sound artist called Catherine Girardeau. She's based in San Francisco, and she does a podcast which is around, I think it's called the Fog something podcast. But anyway, she's coming to London in the next couple of weeks, so we can have a chat with her and see whether she knows of anything or whether she can put feelers out and see whether there are opportunities there. So yeah, definitely. Anne-Marie, you had a question you were asking. I can't remember where it all got to.
Well, I had a couple of questions for Amble and Rowena, but they sort of answered them in the flow of what they were saying. But they were both everyone's talk. Tom as well was was fascinating to hear. I mean, I do a monthly walking group with a bunch of people, most of whom are reasonably able-bodied, but we do have one guy who comes with us, Oliver, who is an artist actually, but I don't think he's ever thought of walking art. Actually, he paints, but he's in a wheelchair, and we went on a walk with him along a sort of canal in the sort of northwest of London, and I think everyone had. There had been research done on this walk, and we thought that it would all be fine. But at some point, we came across a staircase and thought, how is he going to get? Unfortunately, there were some strapping young men in the group. So we were like, okay, we were preparing to get Oliver out of the chair and carry him up the stairs, which he's so good-natured. But I thought it's probably a little bit humiliating for him at the same time to have to do this. And then suddenly someone had gone ahead because their dog ran off the leash and said, there's a ramp, there's a ramp. So we were, he was saved from the indignity of being carried up the stairs by these lovely young guys. But it was all those sort of unexpected things that I thought, Oliver must be encountering that all the time. But I mean, I must say to him next time, have you thought about making some art about your getting around? As well, because it's such an interesting area, as you have found, Amble, in your work. You've been able to I mean, I presume you were a musician first, and then you turned that into sound walking and about your walking experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, that is one thing that Rowena, I'm sure you can talk about as well, is the lack of signage. Like, you go to an airport and they say report to special assistance, and you're like, where is it? And there's signs for everything except special assistance. Like, where am I supposed to go? And even things like that, the fact that there was a ramp, but there was no sign saying down there. So half the time you're spending just looking around going, where is the thing I need and why isn't there a sign? It's just mental. Like, half the time, even when there are accommodations, that you can't see them, you can't find them, there's no signage. And you just spend ages just like in a building looking for the ramp or the door that opens onto a flat surface or whatever. It's so frustrating that there's just not proper signage. But like, if you're a wheelchair user, go this way. And like, part of the thing, sorry, I'm rambling on, like, when I did the Plymouth Sound Walk, because I'm a student, or I did my PhD at Plymouth, and part of it is like, not only have you got to like find your way around a campus, and when you're a PhD student, you're not on campus very often, so it's bits that you've never been to. But it's like, Plymouth campus is like this, so half of it is like big stairways. So it's like, well, how do I physically get to the library? Because it's there, but it's up like 3 flights of steps. And so I have to come out of the university, I have to go all the way around the street and back in the university at another angle. And like part of my sandwalk at Plymouth was to try and show people at Plymouth that actually the routes that I take are really different from the routes everyone else takes, because I can't get to the same buildings that you're going to get to. And yeah, just if somebody just did like a campus map for universities of like, if you're a wheelchair user, this is the route, rather than there would just be so much, yeah.
Rowena's got a pounce on you.
Yeah, go Rowena, go.
Oh, well, it's just, well, funnily enough, it's possibly just going off in a different tangent, but that is exactly what the mapping company does that I work for now. We make campus maps for universities because my last job was working at the University of Essex, and there I chaired the Access Forum. And the University of Essex is 1960s university built into a valley, steep sides. So it's about 7 stories high, very, very complex to find your way around, and designed to be labyrinthine. I mean, literally designed. That was one of the inspirations, because they wanted people to have the experience of getting lost at junctions and have interesting interdisciplinary conversations. So the architecture was built to kind of reflect that. But in fact, most of those conversations are just around, between people who are lost, kind of thing. And then even the non-disabled people at the uni couldn't help the disabled people, because they didn't even know their own routes around it, less still the route that the other alternative routes you have to take if you're a chair user. So the Access Forum, that's how I got into digital maps, really. I was thinking a digital map could solve this. So I got some proof of concept funding within the university to see if we could get that built, and it was built. And that led to those people breaking away from the university, setting up the mapping company that I subsequently, many years later, left the university to kind of join. So, and it's interesting now that the university, they forgot that detail. So at some point in the future, a few years, just before I left, they were talking about remapping in university, and they were like, we must make sure we get the Access Forum involved, because they decided they would base, the university had mapped in all different crazy ways. They were like, we need one strong brand identity, and we're going to go with the campus access map, the online access map. We're going to base all other maps on that branding, but we must get the Access Forum involved, because it's got to be accessible. And we had to sort of say to them, well, actually, it was the Access Forum who commissioned this map in the first place, and it is fully accessible. That's how it began, and it's just that a map that is accessible for chair users is, by definition, accessible for everybody else to find their way around as well. So it was a very, I know, sweet ending to that, to be able to kind of say to the university, actually, the thing that you already have is fully functioning as an accessibility map, Yeah, so, and I think that answers, Anne-Marie, your question in the
yes.
The question about that.
Yes,
the work I was doing now.
Accessible university maps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but they're for all staff and student members, but they happen to have inclusion at their core. Yes, they were just designed to address that exact problem.
Yeah, well, I'd like to pose a question to my colleague Babak, if he's actually there, or whether he's just left his computer on, because Babak is the developer of the Derive app, with which you can generate decks of prompts about getting around your different places wherever you are. So Babak, I'm going to ask you, has there ever been a Derive deck that's been developed with wheelchair users or mobility impaired people in mind? You come across something like that, because these guys are obviously getting lost.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The Reef app is open, so anyone can create decks of task cards to explore the urban environment, and they don't have to tell me what they're doing. And if they don't tell me, then I will also not automatically see what they're doing. So we've got a few hundred decks, I think, in the app, but I'm only aware of maybe a few score of them. but I don't think so. There might be one, but I don't know. I'm not aware of one, but I am aware of one that focused on public health and also the risks and dangers of moving through the public space when the public space is not really designed for walkers. Was really more the objective, but so that's the closest that I can think of a deck that was designed for urban discovery that is in the revamp. But as I said, it might very well be that someone made a deck specifically for people in wheelchairs or with mobile or who are mobilely challenged. But I do not know.
Yeah, great. Okay, and yeah, can you put the link to the revamp in the chat, and then
Yep.
Okay, is there anyone else who wants to sort of put in a shout, or should we go around and give Amble, Rowena, and Tom the last word, kind of thing? But if there's someone else who wants to say or ask something or make a comment, now's the time to do it. And if not, we'll invite Amble, Rowena, and Tom to have the last word. Who's going to be the first last word?
Well, I will be, but just
the first last word. Okay.
First last word. Well, very, very briefly, I would say that the way forward is about recognizing that diversity is the norm. I actually really don't even like the word inclusive, but that's the best word that we have right now. I mean, in America, they talk about universal design, not inclusive design, which I kind of prefer, because so long as we talk about inclusive design, I know exactly why we do, because exclusion is a real thing, and I feel it quite viscerally myself sometimes. But as long as we have the term for talking about these issues is inclusive design, we're constantly being reminded that the reality is permanently that some of us aren't, that there's exclusion going on. Whereas universal kind of does the same thing, but it gets away from it and just says, like, this design, one way or another, has got to try and speak to everybody's needs. And everybody's needs are very, very diverse. They're not homogenous at all, So diversity is the norm, and that's got to be the starting place of all design. And as far as disability is concerned, we need to be really trying to stretch horizons and stretch people's expectations and being less fearful and more ambitious, and disabled people can, sorry, it comes back a bit to what the tangent I went on, Andrew, but, put the information out there and let disabled people make their minds up about it. But it has to be good information and rich information and available in different kinds of forms, and it has to be information that we're responsible for, that we can put our names to, that we keep up to date in various ways. All of that is true. But if we're doing that, then let disabled people free to run with it, that's what I would say.
Tom or Amble?
Shall I go next? First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for inviting me to speak to everybody tonight. It's been wonderful to hear Rowena and Amble as well from their perspectives and the brilliant work that they're doing as well. So very enlightening on my part as somebody who doesn't have a wheelchair and is ambulant, but also at the same time is in a role trying to help as many people to access the countryside as possible. And just following on from what Rowena was saying there, I think sometimes disability can be one of the greatest forms of ability, because it throws in so many different perspectives. I think if everybody was on the same sort of keel and saw the world from exactly the same perspective, then everything would be very boring, wouldn't it? And we'd all be doing exactly the same things. But I think what we've heard tonight has just proven that that disability gives us that ability to shine light on different sorts of things, deal with things in different ways, and just attack life as best we can and enjoy it whilst we're doing it.
Yeah, definitely, Tom. I agree, and Rowena as well. Like you've both been so interesting and so inspiring. Oh no, it's dangerous to say disabled people are inspiring. But no, I've really loved listening to what you have to say, and thanks so much for listening, everybody, and inviting me to talk. Yeah, what Tom was saying about disability gain, we have so much ableism in our culture that in all cultures really, that it's really hard for us to imagine that disabled people have anything to contribute, whereas actually we have a perspective that you won't have seen, that you may not have thought about. We have a way of thinking about the world, we have a way of behaving with each other, we have a way of working in groups that you might not have come across in other worlds. We have and that sort of concept of disability gain is like becoming a new kind of buzzword that I'm really excited about, because we do have a lot to say, and I feel like we can make the world kind of a more interesting place if we talk about how disabled people function. So, for example, during COVID, like everyone behaved like no one had ever been locked down before, whereas lots of disabled people don't leave the house for months on end. And like all the disabled people I knew were like, oh, lockdown, well, yeah, it was fine. Because we're just like, we have those skills. Like, we went through it on our own. It was horrific. We learned to deal with it, and then we just do it. So it's kind of like, why aren't we putting the people with that kind of knowledge front and center and writing columns in The Guardian about, okay, lockdown, you guys aren't going to know about this, but this is what we learned about it because we're disabled. So much stuff that we just do because of our disability that abled people would completely have to freak out about if they ever like come across it, like, oh, I can't cope, and disabled people are like, oh yeah, you just deal with it like that. So I feel like, changing the way people think about disabled people, not as like, oh, we have to help them to do things that we can do. It's like, well, no, actually, we can help you do things that we can do as well. We sort of have that insider knowledge about ways of living and being and acceptance and community and like yielding and letting things be, and then doing what you can when you can, and all of these things that I think abled people sometimes struggle with. We're very kind of used to navigating and allowing that flow into our lives. So like I'd love to be able to kind of share our knowledge with abled groups and give a little perspective on what it is to be a different kind of human, and what you can learn and benefit from. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody. And I feel like I've just waffled again. Sorry. But yeah, it's so
No, you're very welcome to waffle. No, what I was going to say was, we're hoping this isn't going to be a one-off, that we're not, the idea of everybody out and about, because we haven't really talked about people who are sensory impaired. We mentioned it off tangent a little bit. So if there are walking artists out there at the moment, or that there are people who are making work to encourage people who are sensory impaired or ADHD or neurodivergence or whatever the latest acronym is to explain, people who are, impacted by the environment in which they live, then we would love to hear and have those suggestions. Anyway, thanks to everyone for coming along. Looking forward to seeing many of you online again at some point, and enjoy the rest of the evening or day or morning or afternoon or wherever you might be.